At the end of the regular season of 2022, how do the 10 Football Bowl Subdivision conferences compare to each other? This is the Gridiron-Connoisseur. I present the results of my objective formula that will provide an unbiased answer. This formula will rate the 10 Football Bowl Subdivision conferences with the results through Week 13 of the American Athletic, Atlantic Coast, Big 10, Big 12, Conference USA, Mid-American, Mountain West, Pacific 12, Southeastern, and Sun Belt conferences. The criteria used in the formula to rate the 10 FBS conferences include the following factors: wins and losses versus out-of-conference opponents. Wins on the road are worth more than wins at neutral sites, which are worth more than wins at home. Wins versus FBS opponents are worth much more than wins versus FCS opponents. Wins versus other conferences champions earn bonus points toward a conference's overall score. The Southeastern Conference's score did drop during November. However, the decline was not enough for the SEC to lose its top ranking. The scores for the Big 12 and the Big 10 did remain the same, since neither played an out-of-conference game during November. The SEC won 6 of its 9 games versus the Atlantic Coast Conference, had a 4-0 record against the American Athletic, Mountain West, and Conference USA, won all 3 games versus the Pacific 12, won all 7 versus the Mid-American Conference. However, every member of the SEC did play an FCS opponent. The Big 12's results remain the same as they were at the end of September, going 1-1 versus the SEC, 2-0 versus the Big 10 and the Big 12 respectively. However, Oklahoma and Texas were the only members of the Big 12 who did not face an FCS opponent. Likewise, the Big 10 did not play any non-conference games in November. The Big 10 won its only matchup against the Southeastern Conference, but lost both matchups against the Big 12. The Big 10 also lost one of its 9 games versus FCS opponents when Northwestern lost to Southern Illinois. In November, the Atlantic Coast Conference score did decline while the Pacific 12 improved its score. The ACC lost 3 of 4 intra-state rivalry games against the SEC. Nevertheless, the changes were not sufficient to alter the order of the rankings. The ACC won 2 of its 4 games against the Big 10 and Big 12 respectively. However, the ACC lost all 4 of its games versus Notre Dame. Additionally, Louisville was the only member without a game versus an FCS opponent. The Pacific 12 won 2 of its 3 games against the Big 10 and Notre Dame respectively. However, the Pac-12 had 10 of its 25 wins versus FCS opponents. Southern California and Colorado were the only members without having played an FCS opponent. There was one change in the order of the rankings since the end of October. The AAC moved into 6th place, while the Sun Belt dropped to 7th. The American Athletic Conference slips just ahead of the Sun Belt by 1/1000th of a point. Despite the AAC's upward trend, it failed to justify its insistence on the concept of the Power 6. The AAC did win 2 of 3 games versus the Pacific 12. However, the AAC won only 1 of 3 versus the Big 10, only 1 of 4 versus the Big 12, only 1 of 5 versus the ACC, and lost all 4 games against the SEC. The Sun Belt Conference lost 2 of its 4 out-of-conference games in November, costing the Sun Belt Conference its number 6 ranking. the scores for Conference USA and the Mountain West Conference also declined. The Sun Belt split its 2 games against the American Athletic and Big Ten, and the Sun Belt won 1 of its 4 against the SEC. However, the Sun Belt lost all 5 of its contests against the ACC and both of its games against the Big 12. Conference USA won 2 of its 4 against the Atlantic Coast Conference. However, it lost all 3 against the Big Ten and all 4 against the SEC. The Mountain West Conference, a frequent opponent of the Pacific 12, only managed to win 1 out of 8 games against their neighbors on the Pacific Coast. Additionally, the Mountain West lost all 4 of its games against the Big Ten and all 3 of its games against former member BYU. Additionally, the Mountain West played 12 games against FCS members, but only won 9 of those. The Mid-American Conference scores remain the same as it did at the end of September, since none of its members played out of conference in November. The Mid-American Conference lost all 7 games against the SEC, all 3 of its games against the Big 12. It did manage to win 1 of 7 of its games against the Big 10. However, it lost 2 of its 11 games against the FCS members. The rankings of the conferences are more likely to shift after the end of the regular season. Bonus points for defeating other conferences' champions will be awarded. Also, with the plethora of bowl games, the scores will likely be altered of every conference, leading to possible reordering of these rankings. Be on the lookout for a video after the national championship game in which the final rankings of all the 10 FBS conferences will be released.